But that was a piece of equipment that I used for many years. And then with every generation, we've seen the leaps and bounds of technology taken, from floppy disks to hard drive storage. The way technology has changed, when I graduated from college with my bachelor's in political science, I thought I might like to work in a law firm and become a policy analyst. And I was looking for a job, and it was so difficult to find one. I sent many cover letters, but agencies and organizations all over the country were not as interested. And I had a friend at that time who worked at the Helen Keller National Center in New York who let me know that they had a technology position open for a technology teacher. And my response was, you know, I have my degree in political science, I don't have my degree in computer science. But my friend said, you have so much experience with technology. It's been a hobby for yours for a long time. You even know how to build computers from bare bones structure. So this friend convinced me that I did indeed have the skills to apply for the job. And I flew to New York from Arkansas. That was in 1998, and I interviewed and I was offered the position, and I moved to New York for the position. And I was a teacher, a technology teacher. And part of what I did was teach students what their rights are in terms of getting equipment that will allow them to competitively learn and succeed. It is often the case that schools may not be equipped with that equipment. And as they're minors, when you open a case with VR, you're under 18. And VR sometimes makes the decisions about what sorts of equipment and software you should have or can have. And they may hire an interpreter to read everything to you rather than get the expensive piece of equipment that would allow you to read for yourself. But what that ends up resulting in is that someone may not then be aware of what technology is out there for them, for them to be independently successful. They don't know how to use it. No one is talking it to them. So my job at that point for 2 years was to train people on the equipment that is out there, to train deafblind students. We were using DOS at that time, remember? Before Windows came along, there was DOS. And in 1999, we started using Windows. And in 95 and 98, basically we had to relearn everything that had to do with computers because Windows is a very different operating system from DOS. So I did a lot of one-on-one training and mentoring, which was very gratifying. And it was also useful and helpful for students to see that I was a deafblind individual just like they are. And they then had a role model, somebody that they could look up to, that they could envision a successful future for themselves. But the key for success is always communication. And having that direct communication making sure that we didn't have misunderstandings, not having to go through a third party, was a wonderful opportunity. And I was promoted after my 2 years, and I became supervisor of the technology department at HKNC. I worked with 4 staff. 2 were hearing, 2 were deaf. And it was my job to oversee them doing the training for deafblind students on behalf of HKNC. And then the position was converted in 2005. So people would come to HKNC to receive this training. And then we started traveling, giving workshops on technology to people such as yourselves to know more about what options are out there for deafblind students and the role of a technology evaluation or assessment and how important that can be in assessing exactly what equipment and software is most beneficial for this particular student, because it's very individual. You know, now when I look back at my childhood without really any resources and the technology resources that are available to students today, it's really quite astonishing. And technology enables students to open doors that were previously closed to them and to meet the challenges successfully. So the first question is how to get information about those resources, what equipment is out there, what software is available. The second issue is how to fund the purchase of that equipment or software. And the third is how to train students that they can appropriately use the software to their full benefit, or people with disabilities in general. What equipment is out there, how do they get a hold of it financially speaking, and how do they incorporate it into their lives, into their educational or their career paths. And young students who are coming up now have exposure to computers from the get-go, but there are lots of older individuals for whom that's not true. I remember working with a deafblind girl who had gone to university for 1 year and had lots of struggles in how to use the technology because she hadn't had access to that technology or training during her high school experiences. So she had top-of-the-line equipment and had no idea how to use it. She ended up leaving school, leaving college after the 1 semester, and really it was just about the training. And once we got her trained up to speed, she went back to school and she's been quite successful. So we will see here some of the recommendations that I make, some of the programs, and I know that maybe some of you are wondering about cost and you're worried about cost. But if you go the inexpensive route and buy the cheap software and it breaks on you, then you've got another barrier to overcome. If you don't buy the right equipment, then society pays the price later when the student is unable to be productive in their career. And often students use the equipment in the school setting, but they don't have it at home. And it's so important that they also have access at home so that they can become even more adept at it. And so that they can simply do things like accomplish their homework. So it's not just a 9 to 3 school day for them, but that they have access the way other students have access to educational materials and resources in the evening as well. Just like other students who do research in the evening or on the weekends on the internet, deafblind students and students with other disabilities should also have that access. So if you're running a computer with Windows 7, there are various screen readers that you can get. You can see the list here on the slide. JAWS, Child Access with Speech, the first one on the slide. And then NVDA, Non-Visual Desktop Access, is a free program. So they provide Braille access as well as speech access. And there's Supernova Screen Reading, which is screen magnifying software with Braille or screen magnification support. So for students who have low vision but still have access to some vision, they can start with a magnification program. And as they're learning Braille, they can still make use of their residual sight. So they go hand in hand in that way. There's also Zoom Text. You know that there are many deaf individuals who are later identified as having Usher syndrome, and so they may not have any visual support growing up, but things like Zoom Text can be very useful and beneficial during that transition time. And there are people who are very resistant to learning Braille because of that fear of losing their sight. They don't want to acknowledge that that's what's happening. But it can be a strain on their eyes. And so we try to frame it in those terms, that you can learn Braille and you can use your eyes, but you don't want to overstrain your eyes. And having a program that has both supports can help bridge that. And PCs have lots of accessible technology and software, and it has been true. People have said that PCs are better, but it took a while for Apple to catch up, but then they did, and in some ways have surpassed PCs. This 2008 release, Apple came out with something new. Which is to comply with universal design and to integrate accessibility features into the operating system. So VoiceOver comes with every Mac that you have. You don't have to buy a special software program or download anything for it. So there are no additional costs once you buy a Mac computer. Any kind of Apple product, from Mac to iPhone to iPad, are already enabled with universal design features for accessibility. All of you can go home tonight if you have Macs, open up settings, and enable the VoiceOver. You'll see what I'm talking about. There are 40 characters in a Braille display. So if I were to, for example, go to a friend's house, and a friend of mine has a Mac, and I'm going to use their Mac to check my email, what I will do is bring my Braille display and just hook it up to the Mac through a USB connection, and I'm ready to go. If I'm wanting to do the same thing on a PC, I have to make sure that I've got the software, and I have to bring the disk with me, download the drivers, and so forth. So So the non-visual desktop access is a free program, so that's great if what you got is a PC, but Mac has everything built in. So it's a slightly more expensive product, but in the end, you're not buying all the extra equipment and software. It's very nice to have it integrated in that way into the product. I use an iPhone and an iPad all the time, most of the time. When I'm at home, I use a PC, but it's nice that I have really the option to use either platform. I've got Windows running on my Mac as well, so I can shift between the two platforms on one machine. So what I've done is sometimes PC, there will be software that gets developed that isn't yet on a Mac, so I have both, just so that I can sort of play and experiment as new products come out on either platform. Here we've got a couple of different Braille displays. And, you know, again, it has been my experience that VR likes to go the inexpensive route, and I just caution you about that. I would advise you to have your student have a full technology assessment to find out which equipment they're most comfortable with, which will work best for them. And, you know, when you get something inexpensive and it breaks, and you're back in the original situation, as if you had no equipment at all. And there are different designs of Braille readers in terms of ergonomics. And so it's really important that students have an experience with several different designs, whether they be concave or flat plane. Because sometimes they're just more ergonomically comfortable for them. For example, a concave display might be preferable to a flat display, because there's a lot of muscle tension on the arm when you're reading Braille. There are some displays where when you want to advance to the next line, you have to actually hit a button to advance to the next line, which doesn't seem like it should be such a strain on the muscle, but if you compare it to something that automatically advances as your finger scrolls across the line, it does actually make a difference. So there are all sorts of features that are out there, and I think it's important that students have a full analysis and assessment done and a training to see which equipment is going to be best for them. You don't want to waste the resources by buying equipment that the student won't use because it's not comfortable or intuitive for them. And related to the iPhone and the iPad for communication, what I do is I have a keyboard that goes with my iPad or my iPhone, so I can be out someplace without an interpreter, and I can give my iPhone over to somebody I'm wanting to communicate with. They can read the display, type it back to me, which will then pop up on my Braille display. So we can have conversation. And if you want to see it, let me know and I'll show you how that works after the presentation. But it's, for example, how I got my ticket to get onto the airplane here to interact with the gate agents, was using an iPhone with a Braille display attached. And of course, you might not do that for a long, extended conversation. The iPhone is kind of a small device, but you can use the iPad for a longer conversation, a bit of a larger display. I was trying to get in to see a doctor, and I was very, very busy, couldn't quite get in, and couldn't arrange an interpreter in time. I was trying to get, I had, my doctor had a slot that I could get right into, but I brought my iPad because we weren't able to arrange for interpreting services. And that's how I communicated with my doctor, was via the iPad. It worked. It's a fantastic communication tool. The other tool that I use is known as the Sendero Group GPS. I'm sure many of you use a GPS device. But as you well know, GPS device depends on having visual access to the screen or auditory access to the directions, neither of which I can use. The Sendero Group GPS is a Braille accessible GPS. It was developed by a blind man. It's just text, there are no images at all, there are no pictures. But it's a fantastic navigation tool. So if I'm wanting to go from my home to the pizza parlor, I put in pedestrian route on the GPS and it will guide me right there. I have a friend who doesn't have a GPS, and we used my GPS to direct us to get some places. As somebody who could see, but didn't know where we were. I remember one time I was driving, I was in a cab, and I would give my address, my home address, to the driver. And then I would follow along